Well now, there we go. We beat ending A. Now I get a little A postage stamp on my save, and I can click on it again, and stuff will happen. Right now. Weiss, you dumbass! No, we're past that part, I think.
Whenever I interacted with Kainé, I was reminded about something from my past. Maybe my mind has been confusing her with my sister this whole time. Here we go.
The sound of rain filled the village. The steep cliffs that surrounded the area magnified sound, causing even the slightest drizzle to rattle like a thunderstorm. Thin wisps of smoke streamed from huts as the villagers huddled in their homes and waited out the rain. A single child, however, had braved the downpour and was now wandering slowly toward the wooden hawk-shaped weather vane at the center of town. The wanderer reached the vane, which had existed for as long as any could remember, and stared. The child's face was simultaneously delicate and fierce, like a teacup that had survived a shipwreck. Those traits combined with pale white skin to give the face of almost sexless quality. In the beak... What? Oh, if the beak turns east, I go home. If it stays west, then The child blinked. Rain slowly dripped down the young one's short hair and began its long descent to the ground. Come on. Come on! The child felt a slight breeze and watched as the vein slowly creaked to life. Spinning this way and that for a moment, it finally settled, with the beak pointing firmly toward the east. East? Really? Before the vein could move again, a jagged rock came spinning and tumbling through the air, finally striking home against the child's head. The force of the blow dropped the child to the ground as a hail of stones began to fall all around. Oh no, they found me! A heartbreaking smile crept across the child's face as the stones continued their assault. Through the rain, the sound of multiple footsteps grew louder before a voice rang out. Yoo-hoo, Kainé! The voice belonged to Demo, worst of all the bullies in the area. As Kainé struggled to stand, a final stone came skittering through the mud and bounced against her foot. Blood oozed from a cut above her eye and blurred her vision, but she could make out the shapes of Demo and his usual gang of idiots. The boy seemed taken aback for a moment by Kainé's seeming indifference to the blood dripping from her face, but quickly regained his bravado. What's up, freak? You like the rain? You like getting all wet? Or did you finally decide to run away from home? Though she knew it was futile, Kainé turned to leave. Before she could get more than a few steps, the other children scrambled to surround her, cruelty burning in their eyes. Kainé knew those were not the only eyes on her. The tormentor's parents watched from the safety of their homes. She was attuned to the sensation. It was one she had experienced many times before. While some villagers simply turned a blind eye to the actions of their children, many encouraged it openly. In a society ruled by superstition and fear, Kainé was something to be hated, and if possible, destroyed. I didn't say you could leave, freak. Demo's words chewed at her like a worm through an apple. He can't hurt me, she lied to herself. Be strong. Be brave. He can't hurt me. He can't hurt me. He can't hurt... Oh, look, the little freak's gonna cry. What's wrong? Are you sad that everyone hates you and wants you dead? Kainé prayed for the rain to flood down and carry her away from a world that seemed to have no place for her. But if there were gods, they chose to ignore her. As Demo crept ever closer, the clouds began to thin and the rain slowed. Even the weather hates me. I'm useless, a failure. I wish Demo's rock had taken my head off. Kainé couldn't meet Demo's leering gaze. She lowered her eyes and stared at the muddy ground below. The bully moved forward until he was inches away. He could smell the scent of old meat on his breath. The boy grabbed Kainé's face with thick fingers and yanked it upward. She tried to turn away, but he forced her gaze back and jammed his thumb against her eyelid to pry it open. "You're a freak." "No, I'm not." "Did you just say no?" Demo grinned evilly. "You don't say no to me. No one says no to me." Not even taking his attention from Kainé, he called his cohorts. "Come on, guys, let's give the freak what she deserves." As soon as Demo finished, kicks and blows began to rain down upon Kainé. Demo paused, still grinning, as Kainé curled into a ball and tried to make the pain stop. "I don't get you, freak. What you acting like a girl for, huh? Everyone knows what you really are." Kainé ignored the question, choosing instead to stare at the weather vane. It continued to point east, as if supremely confident about the future it had chosen for her. Go home? Yeah, that's a funny joke for someone with dead parents and no home to go to. "Freak!" chanted the children. "Freak, freak, freak!" Kainé closed her eyes and listened to the rain, waiting for the pain to start again. As the clutching hands of the village children closed around her, she bent her mind to the sound of the rain, letting it become her world entire. The rain fell, but the pain never came. Only when the laughter of her tormentors turned to terrified cries did she dare open a single blood-caked eye. Kainé was shocked to see Demo sprawled on the ground, holding his head and screaming in pain. She could see blood welling from spaces between his fat, twisted fingers. Oh my god, he's crying. He's actually crying. Deprived of their leader, the other children glanced back and forth between themselves as if waiting for someone to step forward and take charge. When no savior emerged, they began an uneasy shuffle away from Kainé. But the young girl was the least of their concerns. Instead, their attention was rapt on the ancient woman standing a few feet away. After struggling for breath for a moment, she finally spoke in a voice thick with rage. "Hurts like a bitch, don't it? Now I suggest you scatter before I throw another one. And if any of you little bastards ever touch my Kainé again, I'll do far worse than throw a rock. You can count on that." The old woman crouched down and gently touched the hand Demo was using to cover the wound. Before he could think to protest, she ground her palm into the wound and twisted back and forth. "Ah!" he screamed, leaping to his feet. "Stop it! What are you doing?" "Quit whining. Ain't no one ever died from a scratch." "You hit me with a rock, you stupid bitch. A big one. That could have killed me." The old woman shrugged. "Death is the best cure for stupid." Demo's face twisted with rage at her words. Locking his eyes on Kainé, he took a step forward and spat on the ground. "Get out! Leave this village! No one wants you here! Either of you!" Seeing the old woman grab another stone, Demo and his companions turned tail and ran. As they fled, the old woman grabbed her side and barked out a single laugh. "Ha! Look at the fat boy go! Guess he's healthy enough to run from a fight." The woman's smile faded as she turned her attention to Kainé. Kneeling down, she removed her shawl and placed it around the young girl's shoulders, then produced a cloth from the folds of her dress and began blotting at the blood on her forehead. "Oh, Kainé," she said, "why didn't you fight back? You're stronger than the lot." The words of her grandmother stung Kainé, and she turned away. "Don't be nice to me. I don't deserve it. Nothing matters anymore." Her tears, held in check for so long, finally began to fall on the muddy ground below. Everyone hates me. They think I caused bad things to happen. They think I'm a freak. I wish I was dead. As Kainé's tears turned to sobs, she felt her grandmother's hands on her shoulders. Despite her advanced age and diminutive size, she was a woman of surprising strength, and Kainé found herself unable to turn away. Don't talk like that, Kainé. It's a river wide and deep that flows between the realms of this world and the next, and it grants no mercy to any that attempt the crossing. You got a duty to fight until your last breath. Understand? The old woman tightened her grip and tried to still the tremor in her voice. You know the pain of losing someone close to you, Kainé. You know because you survived it. As the words hit home, Kainé was struck by the force of her love for the old woman. As a young child, she didn't even know her of her grandmother, but when her parents died, the woman quickly accepted her as her own. Grandma, as Kainé called her, was cunning, vulgar, and quick to violence, and their first few years together had not been easy. But with each year that passed, Kainé and her grandmother had grown closer. However, it was only now, sitting in the mud with tears and blood caking her face, that Kainé truly understood the depths of her affection. Here was a woman who had seen hard times, who had seen death, who had fought through all these things and somehow emerged on the other side. If anyone could understand Kainé's pain and loneliness, it was her. Do I make you sick, Grandma? Of course not, don't be an ass. Kainé drew her grandmother's moth-eaten shawl around her body and shuddered. But my body, it's not normal. If I was normal, then Mom and Dad wouldn't... Hush, interrupted Grandma. I'll not hear another word of this nonsense. You're my granddaughter and I love you, and if folks have a problem with that, they can go to hell. With that, the old woman reached out and placed a wreath of dried flowers in Kainé's hair. The skill it took to bend the flowers without breaking the stems or losing a single petal was remarkable, and the beauty of it made Kainé want to cry all over again. Oh my gosh, these are lunar tears! Grandma, you made this for me? Lunar tears were legendary flowers. Most people could live their entire lives without ever seeing one, and yet her grandmother had somehow collected a dozen or more. Kainé reached up and touched the wreath as if she couldn't believe it was real. Where did you find these? Oh, you know, just stumbled on them one day when I was out doing the shopping. The old woman turned away as she was explaining, leading Kainé to suspect that the search had been much more difficult than she was letting on. The pains she took to construct the ornament, let alone track down the flowers used in construction, made Kainé's heart hurt. She reached up and gently adjusted the wreath, admiring the way it felt between her fingers. Didn't quite turn out right, said her grandmother as she squinted at it. These old hands have trouble with delicate work, but it sure looks good on a pretty girl like you. Kainé blushed and turned away. You think I'm pretty? Of course you are. What a fool thing to say. Thank you, Grandma. Her grandmother smiled. We're gonna be fine, you and me, she said. Long as we got each other, we'll be just fine. Kainé took her grandmother's hands in hers. The two of them struggled to their feet. As they began the long walk home, Kainé gripped the hand with all her might, as if trying to stop smoke from drifting away on the wind. The rain had stopped. Kainé stood beneath the weather vane, watching it spin in lazy circles, no longer caring about the direction it faced when it stopped. I don't need to escape. I have a home now. Grandma loves me, and that's enough. Even if it's us against the world. Kainé let her gaze drift up past the vane and into the cloudy sky. The last faint hints of a rainbow were slowly fading, and as she turned and headed for home, the light scattered into a million particles and vanished, seemingly taken away on the breeze. Kainé's dreams of daily life, apparently. Let's recap a little bit, because a bunch of stuff happened here. First of all, we found out that, we already knew that everybody hated her in the village, which I assume it's the area that she's always been in, and they're miserable, so no loss there. All those people are awful and die. Her grandmother was the only person she could cling to, and of course we know the grandma was the boob shark monster thing, so grandma's dead at this point. It turned into some sort of crazy monster at one point, and it was put down after multiple encounters. So that's why it was so personal and why she had to defeat the Shade that replaced her grandmother at that point. We also seem to have a reveal that Kainé is transgender or hermaphroditic or something in the spectrum of not easy normal categories. I lose track of some of the words sometimes. I'm trying to piece that together a little bit because it's hard to unless something happened to her. I'm trying to think, like, how does she wear the underwear she has if she has anything in there besides, you know, but I'm not sure. Or maybe I don't know. Either way, there's something complicated going on there, and that village is full of horrible bigots for reasons other than we thought. Because it seemed like she might have just been living with this lifelong infection of the Shade thing that she has, and that might have been why the town feared and hated her. But that's not mentioned at all. They talk about her gender instead when they talk about why she's a monster. In the distance, Kainé heard the steady sounds of an axe striking wood. The noise had a purposeful quality to it, as if she was hearing a master woodsman go about his work. The firewood being produced, however, was far from a work of art, as could be. Pieces of every shape and size were being flung about in a barren yard with wild abandon. Anyone trying to stack such wood would probably die of frustration before the job was through. Stupid piece of shit axe? Kainé's grandmother flailed away with the axe, filling the air with both splinters of wood and words that would make the most hardened sailor blush. "Grandma," called Kainé. "What?" yelled the old woman, taking her eyes off the wood for a moment. "Oh, it's you, Kainé. Don't get too close, or I might take your goddamn foot off by mistake." She brought the axe down on a piece of wood, sending chips flying in every direction. One spun past Kainé close enough to for her to hear the whistle, at which point she decided to step back. Once she'd scuttled to a safe distance, she cupped her hands around the mouth and shouted, "Grandma, do you need help? I can get you water or lunch or, a new axe or something." The axe, poised to strike another wobbly blow, paused in midair. The old woman considered her granddaughter's offer for a moment, then smiled. "Ha. Tell you what, since I'm doing such a piss-poor job at chopping, why don't you come here and take over so I can get the water? Shades have been restless lately, you know, and I don't want you running into one of them bastards." Oh no, is this gonna be how she dies or gets lost? Relinquishing the axe, her grandmother picked up a long pole with wooden buckets on either side. Gathering water was, by far, the most difficult of the two jobs, but Kainé knew better than to complain. Once Grandma's mind was set, there was no changing it. Kainé did her best to help with chores, but Grandma took every task that required travel to the village. Though she had a long list of plausible excuses, Kainé knew the real reason. She didn't want her granddaughter to be taunted and harassed by the villagers. Once Kainé moved in, Grandma decided to take up residence a good distance from the area. Out of sight, out of mind seemed to be the best policy when it came to villagers and her granddaughter, and rare were the days when any but the two of them could be found on the rocky acre of land they called home. Kainé enjoyed the solitude, but harbored a secret resentment for her grandmother, that her grandmother was forced to spend her golden years in such a place. After watching her grandmother leave, Kainé turned her attention to the task at hand. She had never chopped wood before in her life, and soon discovered why the old woman hated the chore. Swing after swing of the axe produced only a tiny crack in the wood, and when she finally managed to connect with a solid stroke, the tool embedded itself in the log and refused to budge. Frustrated, Kainé swung the axe around her head and threw it, log and all, across the yard. Damn it! Damn it! Ah, crap! She suddenly understood the joy her grandmother felt in a good curse. Happier now, she picked up the axe, forcing it from the wood, and resumed chopping. She had a natural skill with the blade, but the task was challenging, and blisters soon began to form on her small pink hands. Okay, well maybe this isn't where something bad happens to Grandma, and maybe this is just where Kainé picks up swearing and violence. That's a happier story. This is tough. And my logs are all weird sizes. Spitting on her palms and ignoring the pain, Kainé redoubled her efforts. Just as she was developing her rhythm, Grandma returned from the village. Setting down her buckets with a small sigh, she took one look at the logs and coughed out a wheezy laugh. Pretty clumsy, girl. You better practice if you... Her grandmother suddenly collapsed on her knees, causing one of the buckets to wobble precariously. Eyes wide, Kainé dropped the axe and ran to her grandmother's side. Grandma! The old woman shook her head and pointed a trembling finger at the bucket. Get the bucket. Can't let it spill. Kainé steadied the bucket with a foot as she knelt by her grandma. A small bit of water sloshed over the side and made a new home in the hem of her dress, but Kainé didn't notice. Grandma, what's happening? Crazed with panic, she grabbed her grandmother by the shoulders and shook. After a moment, the woman lifted her arms and batted Kainé away. Stop that! Just stop now, she cried, breathing heavily. It ain't like I'm dying. Just tired from the trip is all. Kainé desperately wanted to believe her, but one look at the old woman's shaking hands and worn face told her more than words ever could. Her grandmother had lived a long, hard life, and it seemed the bill was coming due. The time when her grandmother watched over Kainé was ending. Sooner than either of them had feared, the positions would be reversed. The next morning, Kainé came to the side of her grandmother's bed and took her wrinkled hand. Grandma, you're sick, and you need medicine. I'm going to the village. The old woman shook her head and tried to rise, but Kainé gently pushed her down. It's all right, she said. I'll be fine. Her grandmother fixed her with a gaze that could melt steel. After what seemed like an eternity, she finally lowered her eyes and sighed. Well, I don't like it, goddammit. But I guess I should quit being so stubborn and let you grow up. The old woman watched as Kainé strapped on her boots and made her way down the road to the village. Hours later, as an unseen sun made its way across the dark and rainy sky, she was still watching. Kainé moved at a brisk pace, checking her pockets every few minutes to make sure the money her grandmother gave her was still there. Every noise caused her to spin on her heels, making sure she wasn't being stalked by a shade, or worse, Demo and his gang. But she encountered neither tormentors nor shades, and Kainé finally found herself at the entrance to the village. The few adults she could see glanced sideways at her, then muttered to each other behind raised hands before slinking away into the shadows. Her heart racing, Kainé took a series of rapid, shallow breaths and tried to calm herself. I have to prove myself. I have to help Grandma. I have to be strong. She chanted those words to herself over and over as she slowly made her way. Finally, her eyes settled onto a rotund, older woman who was angrily waving her arms in the air and telling anyone who would listen exactly what she thought of Kainé's presence. Hey, lady, said Kainé with a bravado she did not feel. Where's the apothecary? The woman's flabby cheeks shook in bewildered anger. How dare this thing speak to me? They seemed to say. But Kainé saw that her eyes held a different emotion. Fear. Yeah, we're both scared, lady. Trust me on this one. Which way? She repeated. The woman pointed at a small building on the right before hitching up her dress and stumbling off in the other direction. Kainé cringed, expecting a stone to come flying from the assembled crowd, but none came. Her mind was filled with a strange sense of pride as she made her way to the apothecary. But the new emotion had little time to take root, for as soon as she opened the door, she noticed a familiar customer at the counter. It was Demo. He'd clearly been sent here on some kind of family errand because his gang of followers was nowhere to be found. "Oh my god," he sputtered. What are you doing here, freak?" The insult was delivered without force, and Kainé happily ignored it. Stretching on tiptoes to see over the counter, she asked the shopkeeper for the medication. "Ha!" barked Demo. "That old bitch finally keel over?" "Go to hell, Demo." The boy's eyes grew so wide they seemed ready to fall out of his head, but before he could let fly a comeback, or worse, a punch, the apothecary told them to knock it off before he kicked them out of the store. Demo slunk out of the shop, cursing Kainé under his breath. Once he was gone, she allowed herself to breathe once more, taking a brief tour of the shop while the owner prepared her medication. Countless tiny bottles filled the cramped store, each with a label written in some indecipherable language. An ocean of aromas assaulted her nose, creating a scent that was exotic, but not altogether unpleasant. Seeing such a variety of supplies gave Kainé a sense of peace. Surely, in a world so vast, there would be a place that she could call home. On the far wall behind the counter rested a portrait of a stunning young girl. The picture had once contained bright, vibrant colors, but time had worked its magic, and they were beginning to fade. The beauty of the work, however, remained undiminished. "You like that picture?" Kainé turned to find the apothecary, with a small vial of medicine in his hand. His eyes were gentle but sad, and they seemed to stare through her and into nothing as he spoke. "That's my daughter. I sketched it when she was just a little girl. She's been dead a long time now." Kainé didn't know how to respond. She just stared at the portrait and tried to come up with the right words. "Pictures are wonderful things," continued the shopkeeper. "They let the ones closest to you live on forever." He shook his head slightly, then looked down at Kainé and smiled. Handing her the medicine, he reached into his sizable green apron and produced a handful of old wax crayons. "You should have these. There's no one left that I wish to draw." Kainé took an instinctive step back, causing the shopkeeper's face to darken. "Yes, I've heard the rumors about you," he said. "It's a small village and the word travels quickly. Between you and me, I'm not sure which of them to believe, but I also don't think they matter much. I knew your grandmother, Kali, and I think the way she was driven out of this town is just deplorable." "Grandmother's name is Kali?" thought Kainé suddenly. She was still mulling this new fact over in her mind as she reached out and gently took the crayons from the apothecary's hands. "Your grandmother is an old friend of mine," he said as Kainé scooted away yet again, "and I owe her much. I'm willing to wager that she would like it if you drew a picture of her. Yes, I think she'd like that very much." Kainé's murmured there's no apostrophe S there, it's just her name's hyphen throwing me off. Kainé murmured a quiet agreement, but inside her heart was bursting. Never before had a villager treated her with anything but complete contempt. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible step, but it was a step nonetheless, and with enough tiny steps she might one day discover the rest of the world. When Kainé returned home, she found her grandmother asleep in her bed. Her feet were blackened and raw, even bleeding a bit in places, leading Kainé to think that she had been pacing around the room until exhaustion finally caught up with her. She placed the medicine by her grandmother's pillow and turned to leave, but found the old woman's hand clasping around her arm. "Back already, are you?" asked her grandmother with a yawn. "Come here, let me have a look at you." Grandma sat up and examined Kainé from head to toe. Finally satisfied that nothing terrible had befallen her grandchild, she leaned back and allowed herself to relax. "Well, how was it? Did those bastards give you any trouble?" "It was kind of fun," said Kainé with a small smile. No, seriously, it was. It was fun, was it? Asked her grandmother in a voice which implied she believed anything but. Uh-huh. So anytime you need me to run an errand, just let me know. As she spoke, Kainé removed the crayons from her pocket. After a brief explanation of their source, she informed her grandmother that she was going to sketch her portrait. A portrait of me? Ridiculous. No one wants to stare at a wrinkled old crone. But Grandma, it'll make you live forever. Horse manure, said her grandmother, throwing back the sheet from her bed. Living forever would just piss me off. Now put those crayons away and help with my dinner. But Kainé would not relent, and in the end, Grandmother found herself leaning against the wall of their house as if posing for a master artist. Kainé took up the crayons and eyed her subject carefully. Just as her grandmother was about to nod off, Kainé finished the work. After staring at it for a bit, she released it from her grip and let it slowly drift to the floor. It's terrible. It doesn't look like you at all. I'm sorry, Grandma. I thought these crayons would, you know, make drawing easy or something. The old woman's eyes narrowed at her granddaughter's disappointment. Let me be the judge of that, she said, ignoring the pain in her back and reaching for the paper. The sketch could have been a person's face. It could have been a boulder, a lump of clay, or an incredibly misshapen loaf of bread, all rendered in chaotic array of colors. The woman stared at the picture for a long time, then slowly wheezed out a laugh. Oh, Kainé, she said between laughter, you truly are my blood. You're as clumsy as me, and I love it. But, hush. I won't hear any more bull about how ugly you think it is. It came from the heart, and I'll treasure it always. True to her word, the old woman gave the picture a place of honor above the kitchen table. In the days that followed, Kainé would often catch her staring at the portrait with a strange smile on her face, an action she interpreted as silent, mocking laughter. A week later, Kainé could stand it no more and asked her granddaughter to take the artwork down. Posh, said the old woman. I'll take this down when they roll me in my shroud. She pondered this for a bit, then turned to Kainé and dropped to one knee. Listen to me, girl. Seeing this picture makes me happy in a way I've never felt before. And it makes me want to go on, so that someday you can feel the same happiness. It was a moment that burned itself in Kainé's memory. A perfect blend of pride and love and joy that came together to form a lifelong remembrance. She swore to never forget this moment, to never forget the old woman who had made her place in the world possible. Time moves on, people and memories come in and out of a life like ghosts passing through a hall. But this moment will be different, Kainé swore, because I will remember it forever. Forever. Kainé's dreams, separation. Wow, we're front-loading a lot of this, huh? And here I was worried that it might be too much of the same content, which it still might be when we start playing as actual characters again at some point. But this is all new and pretty big deal stuff for Kainé. No major revelations in the last one, aside from the idea that she, the grandmother's name is Callie, had an old friend, and Kainé tried to make a nice little portrait of her, and it was a heartfelt moment.